things that Paul always says is he wants to start record. Well, I've got a cat here that's being recorded. He wants to start recording like right away because he doesn't want to lose anything in case there's something really good that we start talking about.
Mm-hmm. That's true. It's true. I mean, most of when you're editing is just lopping off the beginning or the end when you're doing like intro stuff, but you never know if that stuff becomes important later down the road.
Yeah. Well, I guess or wherever this video starts, or if we just play it from the beginning, I'll kick it off a little bit with, you know, I've been on the channel several times. Seven might be right, I don't know, but certainly several times.
Okay.
And my name is Jeff, and I'm kind of the de facto curator of all of the conversations that go up on the Randos United channel. And I don't know, do you want to introduce yourself? Because I'm not sure that you've been on any channels or had any conversations online. I don't know if this is your first time talking to anybody or not.
Yeah, this is my first time doing a Randos thing for sure, or any Paul Vander Klay, or I mean, I can explain how I got involved, but I haven't actually been up online.
Yeah.
So
I'll just interject for just a second, right? You and I came in contact through the Bridges of Meaning Discord, which Paul's Sacramento Meetup group put together, or some folks in Paul's Sacramento Meetup group put together. And sorry, I thought there was something else that I wanted to say there, but you're on the Discord, you're Michael C., right?
Yeah, and that is in fact me. In fact, I think my Zoom displays my full last name, so which is neither here nor there. But that's actually me.
Too, if you
well, no, I mean it's fine. If people want to track me down, if people want to find me, that's just fine with me.
Yeah.
I'm there to be found and talked to, assuming you have time, which I probably will have loads of time. But then again, I don't know. So my profession is that I tutor, and I have the possibility of doing a lot of tutoring online.
Mm-hmm.
So with all this coronavirus shutdown, schools going out, you know, and I think that school year is going to be canceled altogether in most places if it hasn't been already.
That's what it's sounding like.
Yeah. So I mean, online tutoring could become a high demand thing.
Yeah.
For the moment, I have in-person things that are keeping me busy, but it could change, day by day, and then all of a sudden I'll be crazy busy. But I'll try to respond to people if they want to track me down, talk to me.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off. If there was something else you wanted to say there.
Well, I mean, I was trying to think of I think maybe you had asked me more broadly about my involvement. I don't remember exactly what the question was at this point.
I can't remember either. One of the things that I just wanted to ask you is just tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yeah. So, yeah, I will. So I grew up in Salinas, California, and I found my way out here in Tucson, Arizona, where I am really deeply involved with a church, pretty small church called the Village Church. And the Village Church, one of the pastors is a guy named Rod Hugen, and he is a very good friend of Paul Vander Klay, and they're best buds because they were involved with the Christian Reformed Church, the CRC denomination, and they would go back to the Midwest for these like meetings of various kinds. It's like a home missions board, I think it was. I'm sure they could correct me with all the details, but in any case, they're high up mucky mucks in the denomination, and they would fly out for these meetings. And since they were both on West Coast time, or close enough in Arizona, we don't do daylight savings time, so a lot of times we're the same time zone effectively as the West Coast. And they would not be able to fall asleep, and they would spend hours together with everybody else. So when Paul got started with this whole, Peterson commentary thing, and then started this meetup stuff, it started the Discord, which we eventually met through. I was immediately connected through Rod, and Rod has been up online and talking to Paul Vander Klay before, and then really what catalyzed me getting involved, really, because I kind of put it off for a long time. Rod kept telling me, yeah, Paul has this thing, Jordan Peterson, blah, blah, blah. And that's how it sounded to me, like, yeah, whatever. That's not my thing. But he thought it might be because I actually did my undergrad degree in philosophy, and then I went on and I did a master's degree in philosophy. And so I've got this philosophy background, but I hadn't really heard of Jordan. Well, I mean, I kind of had heard of, but I haven't really gotten into anything with Jordan Peterson stuff. And so it just seemed kind of like, I don't know, this side. It just really wasn't my thing. Like, he was like, we want you to start a Jordan Peterson meetup, or Paul does anyway. And Rod's like, well, I don't want to do it, so you do it. And I said, well, that's not. One of the things that we value at our church is authenticity. It's like one of our core values. And I'm like, well, that's not really authentic to me. I mean, I could do it and people would show up maybe, but it seems kind of like a gimmick at this point. At this point, it's not. Right now, months later, it's not a gimmick. But that's how I found myself here, is that Paul was going on this tour, and we're finally like, okay, let's get serious. Let's organize online. Let's put together a meetup.com account. Let's advertise. And then I was like, okay, what's this Discord server stuff all about? I'll check that out. And so I've been diving into all these different little nooks and crannies of the internet and figuring out what's going on. And then you were posting some really cool stuff about Switchfoot. And so that's what brings us here today, basically, is that I realized there's another person out on the internet who likes Switchfoot at least as much as I do. Yeah.
Well, that's cool. I wanted to ask you. You may have said this and I missed it, but how did you link up with the Village Church and meet Rod in the first place?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question, and potentially a really long story. I'll try and give it a short version, and we can dive into it longer if you're curious.
Yeah.
So I started out my college career studying computer engineering. It turned out to be a terrible choice for me, but I hammered away at it like a fool, kind of like Sisyphus, in a way, rolling boulders, getting nowhere. For a good long time, until I finally dropped out. And at that point, I really felt like I needed to drop out because I was just done. And I spent some time working in a county jail, and then I went off to Europe, and I stayed at this place in Switzerland called L'Abri.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was there, I was convinced I actually did need to go back and study philosophy formally, not just figure stuff out on my own. And so a friend of mine really good friend of mine, a guy who had been my roommate through most of my time at college up to that point, was going to the University of Arizona for graduate school. His grandparents lived out here, and he kind of jokingly said, like, well, you're applying to schools, why don't you just come out to the University of Arizona? We'll be roommates. And the more I thought about that, the more that sounded actually like a really good idea, like the best of my options, because it just made total sense. Why start out with like figuring out another roommate situation? I knew I loved this guy. He was one of my best friends, and still is. I'd had a terrible roommate in the dorms my first year. Like, why would I want to roll the dice on that again? So anyway, we came out to Arizona, and we knew a girl who was on staff with Navigators at the university already.
What's Navigators?
Oh yeah, sorry. Sometimes I throw out these Christian terms. Okay, yeah. So there are three major like evangelical Christian ministry organizations that operate on university campuses, especially in the United States, but really worldwide. And one of them, besides Campus Crusade and InterVarsity Fellowship, is a group called Navigators.
Okay.
And yeah, So he and I had been somewhat involved with that group back where the other school that we had gone to, and we got to be, or at least I got to be really involved with them at the University of Arizona through this girl. But more importantly than the involvement with Navigators is that she had already found this church. And so she invited us. We started going in the evenings, because we used to meet only in the evenings, and we would go to these other churches in the morning, which we were never impressed with. And eventually we were thought to ourselves, like, why are we getting, we're not morning people. Why are we getting up in the morning to go to these churches that we don't really like? Like, we felt like we needed to do our due diligence and like finding a good church. But the church that we just loved from the very start was the Village. Just this very small, goofy, weird church. And I just love it to death, and have ever since. Even though I went away for some time to go to graduate school in Colorado, the number one reason I'm back in Tucson is to be a part of this church. And I've been back in Tucson since 2012, so been a part of this church pretty solidly, very solidly for 8 years. And then a couple of years back when I was finishing up my undergrad degree, and even I would consider myself still part of the church even while I was gone. A couple of the guys from the church, including one of the pastors, was in my wedding.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah, even while I wasn't here. So yeah, really deep. In fact, I bought a house directly across the street from the guy who's in my wedding, who's one of the founding pastors of the church, besides Rod. And I did that because it's the house across the street from him. Yeah, like it's a really big emphasis on close-knit community, which is going to be really tough actually right now, because we are forced apart, at least physically, by this coronavirus stuff. And we're making big efforts to connect with people, kind of like this. I mean, we're going to use every opportunity we can electronically to connect with each other.
Yeah.
Phone calls, texts, Zoom videos, Facebook live streams. I mean, we're going to try and break it out in every way we can.
Yeah, my wife works in a church, and this past Sunday they did, well, they always do a live stream of their service, similar to Paul does that at his church, where he has like well, I don't know if he has a live stream, but he certainly records it and puts it on Facebook. My wife's church does do like a Facebook live real time while it's happening, just kind of set up in one of the pews, and just, you can see the entire see the entire setup there. But this past Sunday, since they got away from the large gatherings, they just had 3 or 4 staff members that would rotate out, and it almost looked like a set for like a talk show or something like that. Like, it wasn't set up, just the layout, right? There was like this table that the 3 of them were sitting at, and one was playing a guitar, and one was delivering the sermon, and the other one was did like a little children's time like they normally do in their tradition. But of course there were no children to come running up to the table, so it was more of like a family interactive thing. But it was interesting, because one of the things that they incorporated is they made it an interactive service. Since it was on Facebook Live, people could real time comment, and they could have discussion, or they could make comments on what the sermon was, and it could be like an interactive. There was also like questions and answers. So I found that a really fascinating new opportunity that this limitation had created. A new thing had come out, and as far as I'm concerned, that was something that I've hungered for and have hungered for a long time out of churches, is to be able to have kind of a dialogue with the presenter of what's being talked about. Like, I've watched a lot of YouTube videos. In particular, I watched the Jordan Peterson biblical series, and after he would give his lecture, then he would take questions from the audience, right? There would be probably at least a 30-minute to an hour question and answer session off of the lecture. And I would always talk to my wife in particular, and I would say, Man, I think it would really be neat if you could have something like that following a sermon, or after the church service or the liturgy is over, is where people could all just sit around and discuss maybe the entire church service, but have interaction with the leadership, and just talk through, you know, some of maybe the questions that they had, or um, well, I was about to say disagreements. I'm not sure how well that would go, but maybe it would go well. I don't know. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't always go well. I mean,
yeah.
that's the honest truth. It doesn't always go well, but I think it's worth the risk.
Mhm.
And in fact, a lot of the disagreements, even whether they go well or not, I mean, they're in people's minds and hearts
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
So, like covering it up or hiding it or just not giving a forum for it to be heard is ultimately not productive, is ultimately not good. So this is one of the things, exactly what you're talking about is one of the things that brought me into the church, and maybe the biggest thing, honestly.
Mm.
One thing that was that for a church of, at the time they were probably like 60 people, something like that, like not too big, and maybe even smaller than that. And we didn't have our own building at the time that I first found the church. And there were already two pastors. So that was a big deal to
Mm.
me in the church setting that I grew up in, was very professionalized. And you had pastors that had specific jobs with specific responsibilities and like spheres, and
Mhm.
like it was all very divvied up, very like corporate professional.
Siloed.
Yeah, exactly. And so there was always there was clearly a main pastor, right? The main pastor who was doing the vast majority of the speaking. And what I realized going to the village right off the bat is that there was at least two pastors that were going to constantly rotate in and out, and then there were other people that got to have the main speaker role from time to time already with a tiny group. And like you were talking about, like the question and answer, pushback, comments, questions was built into the liturgy of the worship service. Like, it
Okay.
was just a part of it. We've gotten a little bit away from that since we've maybe unfortunately professionalized a little bit.
Mm.
We now have our own building. There are like closer to 200 members of the church, right? So sometimes it's just unwieldy to do the question and answer, but it's a very much built into the part of what we expect out of when we gather, right? So
Mhm.
after this sermon is given, then there's an opportunity for people to respond if there's time, right? Time permitting.
Mm.
And we'll like walk a microphone around the room to people, and they'll get to ask their questions or give their comments or voice their disagreements even, right? So and then when the service is over, completely over, it extends in a way right into eating together. So our evening service has always been the way it is, and we have dinner after the service is over. And we say after the service is over, but in a lot of ways it's just a continuation of the service.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like what you said, like it wouldn't it be great if there's a way for people to stick around and then talk about what the sermon was, or whatever they want to talk about, but
Mhm.
it provides an easy place, an easy opening for people to then talk about whatever was said or done during the service, including disagreements.
Mhm.
And we get to sit down and do that while we're eating dinner. And then when we added a morning service, eventually, I think that was last year or the year before, really recently, we do the same thing, but it's lunch. So after the late morning service, then lunch is served.
Mhm.
And it's just fantastic. Like, it was always something that I saw exactly what you were saying you're hungry for, right? I was like, this is it. This is great. Like, this is not putting the pastor on a it makes the pastor really accessible.
Mhm.
So you have this opportunity to interact with the pastor. There's more than one pastor, so no one pastor is like the idolized figure who's got all the
Mhm.
answers. I'm not saying that our pastors aren't smart or that they're like untruthful or anything like that, but I mean, they are human beings, and even though they're maybe wiser, have more perspective, done more study on a particular thing than the rest of us, um, they still from time to time get things a little bit off, and we as a congregation have a chance to, or even if they'll say something maybe just that doesn't hit us quite the way that they intend when it first comes out, and then it gives us a chance to have that clarified. So I mean, yeah, it's just been endlessly awesome and just really, really good.
I'm a lurker on CRC Voices, and so I see how whimsical and how smart Rod is, and
Yeah,
wise he is, and just being able to read how he interacts. I'm sure he would deflect all of those compliments about him.
oh, for sure. God, oh man, did you watch the three of the Dutch guys on their little journey? I mean, they're hilarious. I got the opportunity to go. There's a mountain really close to Tucson.
I saw your picture of the three of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got the opportunity to like go in a Rod's SUV up the mountain with them for a good couple hours, and yeah, it was hilarious observing the three of them.
I'm sure.
Just this guy I knew said, I'm convinced that some people, you're familiar with the love language theory?
Yeah.
That sarcasm is one of the love languages, for guys especially, like giving each other crap is like
right.
like the way that you show affection, and it's totally true with this group of people. I don't know if it's a Dutch thing, but it seems to be.
Oh, well, then the people I hang out with are Dutch too. Not really, but in that way of acting, if that is a Dutch thing.
I don't know. On top of it, they're all really tall, with the exception of Job.
Job's
kind of short for
tall.
A Dutch guy. But yeah, that's actually a scientifically established fact that Dutch people tend to be really tall.
Yeah, it's funny seeing that picture of Paul with Jordan Peterson. He's kind of towering above. Well, I don't know how much he's towering above him, but then I know Rod like towers above Paul. So in the pictures that I've seen,
it's kind of a close call. I think Rod's
is it?
also got some weight on Paul. Yeah,
makes him look taller.
But, yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, he's just big. He's a really big guy, very big guy. Yeah, I think he's like something like 6'8", maybe. Yeah, man, you would not want to mess with him on the basketball court. That's all I'm saying.
I would try to stand outside and test my luck with how many shots I could hit from far away.
yeah, just exactly. Don't go within. Don't go within the 3-point circle ever. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm 6'4" or 6'5", so typically I don't have trouble when I played basketball with most people. But then I'd run into somebody like Rod, and I'd be like, I can't get a rebound. I can't really do anything. So I'm just going to wander out here, and I'm going to try to find the open person, and maybe I'll take a shot every now and then.
Yeah. So yeah, you sent that picture of you next to Jon Foreman.
Oh yes.
And Luke was there as well. Luke, who is frequently like the main voice on these videos.
He
and
he is quite prolific on these videos.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's got some interesting stuff to say. I watched at least one of them with you and Luke, and I think Sam on Rhett and Link and some other related stuff, and I thought you guys had some really cool stuff to say. So, I mean, there's a reason why he's featured, is because he's got interesting things to share.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, you are towering over, like you have like it's you're almost double the size, it looks like, of like Jon Foreman, who's a tiny little guy.
Yeah, that was a fun time. That was a birthday present that my family gave me and my kids to go see them. It was about a 2-hour drive away because they weren't coming through Dallas at the time, and I live pretty close to Dallas. And so we had to drive for about 2 hours, but then We got VIP tickets, so it meant we got to do a meet and greet with the entire band before the show and get our pictures taken with them. And I didn't post a picture of us with the entire band because I couldn't find it whenever I was just trying to throw that up there on Discord. But what they do from time to time, at least what the frontman Jon Foreman does from time to time, is after the concert, he'll do a little impromptu after show. And usually it's like just an acoustic set where he'll sit there and he'll play. In that particular show, he was really exhausted, but they still came out and just met with the crowd that was waiting for them and would talk to them. And what I found fascinating about them is, sometimes people in that position, particularly performers, I can certainly understand it. After you have done an entire show, you are pretty exhausted. And, the last thing that you want to do is go meet and greet with people. You just want to go and you want to rest. And, they ride in tour buses and they probably just want to get on to they want to get some rest, I'm sure, because it's getting late into the evening. And what I found fascinating about the band members is they just hung out and talked to the crowd until the crowd went away. They were there and available to talk to anyone that wanted to spend time with them and talk to them and ask them questions and get their pictures taken with them and ask them to sign stuff. And there were no handlers. There was no, okay, that's enough. You've talked to him enough or anything like that. They were just there and available. And they're Jon and Tim. Tim plays the bass in the band, and Jon is lead guitar and lead vocal. Well, probably not lead guitar, but certainly lead vocal. They're preachers' kids. Their dad still pastors a church outside of, someplace near San Diego. I can't remember the name of the city. I always get it wrong when I try to say it.
Encinitas?
Is it Encinitas? Maybe. I can't remember. I've actually even visited that church before.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because
I went.
You were on a Switchfoot pilgrimage, or you were other reasons?
We were on a San Diego Comic-Con pilgrimage. And
there we go. Okay, a Marvel pilgrimage.
I asked my now wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, can we go to the church? We're not going to be that far away. Can we make a trip? Because I was a super fanboy, more even so of their dad than them. Just because.
Oh, really? Wow.
I found him. I started, mainlining all of his online sermons and just listening to everything that he had to say, and just really, really helpful for me at the time and in my journey. So it was good to get to listen to him. And then finally I went to the church, and it ended up being on a weekend when he wasn't in town. So I didn't get to meet their dad, but I have briefly interacted with him online. We've sent a couple of messages back and forth, just mainly for me to, tell him thanks and what I appreciate about the work that he does. But yeah, what I was going to say is I think his sons, they absolutely see what they're doing as, to use church language, as a ministry. And they just see that as a part of what they're there to do, is to be there for people and to help people in any way that they can who want to meet them and want to talk to them and want to thank them for what their music has done. There's so many people that talk about their music and how it's helped them through a lot of difficult periods in their life. I don't know. One of the things that I really enjoyed about listening to all of their dad's sermons is he, in his sermons, overtly and covertly, mostly covertly, but sometimes overtly, draws out the meanings in a lot of their songs that were just hidden to me before. I was just, very Mr. Magoo oblivious towards whenever I would listen to the songs. And then when he would go through his sermons, he would mention things, and I'd be like, wait a second, that's in this song that they do. And there's one in particular that's not technically a Switchfoot song. It's one of Jon Foreman's solo songs that their dad drew out in one of his sermons, and it's a song called Revenge. And I'll link to it in the comments if we end up posting this, and I'll certainly send it to you if you may be familiar with it. It's
I
called,
didn't really get into Jon's solo stuff, but yeah,
yeah.
I probably have heard it at least once.
Yeah, I would recommend his solo stuff. If you like Switchfoot, you'll probably like those songs too. They're a little bit different, but some of them are really good. They're all good, but some of them are just really fantastic. But he has a song called Revenge, and it's essentially sung in the voice of the thief on the cross who accepts Jesus before he dies. And it's poetry, and if you just listen to the song you wouldn't necessarily know that, so I've kind of given it away, but as you start listening to it you're just like, oh, that's what this is. I had heard the song several times, and then when his dad finally explained it I was like, what? I've got to go look up those lyrics and listen to that song again. I had no clue that that's what that song was about. So yeah, I enjoy Switchfoot quite a bit on multiple levels.
Yeah, I mean, you can find a lot of this song meeting stuff now, like within a few keystrokes online.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when you and I probably were first getting into Switchfoot, I mean, you just had to put your headphones on and listen to the album, at least 7 times, and then puzzle it over for hours, and talk to your sister. You listen to this. What do you think this means? And and that's what I would do, because I mean, yeah, the internet was, I guess, there, but it wasn't the kind of thing that it is now,
No.
with lots of stuff just easily. I mean, there was barely even song lyrics posted, and nowadays, I mean,
Right.
like 50 sites, if you Google song lyrics, they're all trying to spam you with advertisements as soon as you land. But yeah, I mean, it was a different world, and I think that's one of the big reasons I got so into them, is that if you wanted to get deep into the lyrics for any band, not just for Switchfoot, but you had to do that. Like, you had to really go dive deep. And I think for a lot of kids growing up today, even though music is extremely important to them, because there's not as much of a necessity to do what you and I had to do, I don't know if they get quite as deep into albums or artists, or even individual songs, because there's so much out there, and it's very easy to just click on to the next song, or even have it autoplay. I mean, you've got so many things that'll just tell you what you probably like as you go. And in a way, it's a shame. I don't know if I've really developed the same kind of depth with very many bands anymore, because of the way the world is now. And also, just as I've gotten older, my relationship with music has been different. I mean, part of what you were saying with Switchfoot, I mean, is that I was going through some really rough times mentally, just struggling with depression, struggling with being an adolescent, struggling with not fitting in with my peers, or at least that's what my internal impression was, struggling with doubt, right? Like, I had all these things, and I don't mean to say that I have no struggles with those anymore, but I'm just in a more stable place. And so, and I have like good, close friends, like people, that I can connect with more than needing to retreat into music to do it. And it's not that once again, it's not that I never use music. I mean, I thought it was fantastic listening to Jon Foreman this week, post a song a day, which is what, although I think he may have missed yesterday, unless I missed it.
Maybe so. I think he's had 4 at this point.
Yeah, well, 4 out of 5 is not bad. I mean, it's a lot better than any habits that I start to form. on the first week. 4 out of 5 is really good. But I guess what I'm saying is the intensity of my engagement has fallen off as I've gotten older, and that may be just something to do with age. It may have something to do with where I am in life now. But as soon as you like pop me in to it, then a lot of that comes rushing back. Throw me into a Switchfoot concert, and I'll be singing until I don't have a voice anymore. Right, which I do as often as I can, really. But like, I rarely drive the 2 hours like you did that one time anymore. but I make a point to go see them if they're in town. And I think for a long time I did see, when I was living up in Boulder, Colorado, I think I saw Switchfoot, must have been every time they came out to the Denver Boulder area for a good 5 years. In fact, even one time there was a guy, I was running low on money. I was a little bit worried about my bank account, and a friend of mine who was also a rabid Switchfoot fan is like, "Oh, I'll spot you the money, man. You can still go to the show." And I was like, "Really? That's so awesome! Like,
That's awesome.
Why would you do that?" He said, I remember his reaction. His statement was, I was like, "Why would you do that for me?" And he says, "Well, it's Switchfoot. It's Switchfoot."
Obviously.
So, right. No, like, yeah, exactly. Like that explained it. Yeah. So I mean, I've definitely been really into Switchfoot, but I'm confessing my drop in. I don't know. I'm just an older, colder person, I guess. Well, not colder, but anyway, maybe a little more circumspect. Yeah.
Yeah, I think perhaps maybe it is something with age. I remember whenever I was a kid, I remember I knew all the songs, all the artists, and all that we had available was what was on the radio. That was about all that there was back then. I'm in my approaching late 40s. Well, mid 40s technically, but it'll be there before I know. So, all we had was the radio. There was no internet. We had the radio, we had TV, but for music, it was just all on the radio. And so I remember I knew all the bands, I knew all the songs. And it confounded me that older people, particularly my teachers.
May have lost each other for a moment here.
Oh.
Let's see if we can get it to refresh. Okay, we went through a little time delay.
Yeah, it said my internet connection is unstable. But now,
okay.
I don't know what the last thing you heard was.
Something talking about being in your mid 40s, and then it got garbled. So
I remember as a kid, all we had was the radio for music,
okay, right.
And like record stores and stuff like that. And there was MTV back then, so you could watch videos.
Oh yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. Talking about pouring your life into different things, right? Like listening to the album over and over and over again until your the laser on your CD player gave out. Yeah. But MTV, music on MTV. Oh man, yeah. Rushing home from school to be like, what's going to be on TRL today?
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I just remember, older people, particularly some of my teachers, they didn't seem familiar at all with the latest music or anything that was going on. And I remember as a kid saying, I'm never going to let that happen to me. I'm always going to know what's going on. And yeah, I think it probably is a function of age and priorities and, to use a Vervaekian term, saliencies. And and so, now with my kids, I'm just like, so who is this person again? They'll talk about someone like it's someone that everybody has known for, years and years and years. And I go look it up and I'll see that, okay, this person's song just came out a month ago. How does anybody know who this person is?
Right.
So right. Yeah, I think it is an age thing. But yeah, one of the things about Switchfoot that I was going to say is I was first introduced to Switchfoot by my by my sister-in-law, who was in high school at the time but was living with us. She was watching some show. This was like the early aughts, maybe 02, 03. And there was some TV show that was on prime time. It was called Pepsi Smash. Like they were the ones who was the one who was sponsoring it. And Switchfoot.
The Crazy in Love cover.
Say again.
The Crazy in Love cover, was that the?
No, it was their first hit song that put them in the mainstream, Meant to Live. And that was the first time. Was it the first time I'd ever heard it? It may have been. I might have heard it on the radio too, but I distinctly remember this is the first time that I actually became aware of Switchfoot as a band. And they played that song, you know, I was just like, ah,
Meant to Live.
just so
Yeah. Yeah, and that was a new sound for them. That was I remember hearing that year. Somebody shared it with me, and it was like, this new Switchfoot song's gonna blow you away. And gosh, what was the sound? What was the software that everybody was using at the time? It'll come to me. But anyway, you know, you could have this plug-in where it would do all the like graphics in response to the sound waves that would come on my screen. And one of the associations I have with that song is the kind of swirling, you know, visual stimuli that was produced by the sound, the algorithm translating the sound into visual. Yeah. And I was blown away, just like you were, apparently, seeing it, you know, kind of a live format on Pepsi Smash. Yeah, they must have gone on to Pepsi Smash more than once because, or some kind of Pepsi something or other. Because yeah, I have a different association with Pepsi and Switchfoot. But yeah, keep going.
They had done a cover of which song?
"Crazy in Love" by Beyonce.
Oh, really?
The one that has not held up over time because one of the lyrics is, you know, you got me wishing you'd page me right now.
It's a little,
right,
isn't it?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It's like, what? Page you? What are you talking about? Yeah. I mean, you and I know, but like,
yeah, there's
an entire world out there. Yeah, that has no idea.
From that period that is very dated, not by Switchfoot, but just from that era, called Beepers. I encourage people to go look that one up. Actually, I discourage people from going to look that up now that I think about it.
Yeah, well, if you've ever watched Caddyshack, right, one of the main characters in the story is Dr. Beeper, right?
Oh yeah.
Which is a gag that so many people have no idea what, like, they just don't understand. I mean, they probably have an inkling of an understanding because they're kind of nascent cell phones in a lot of way, but yeah.
Yeah, there was such a
beeper. Why would it be called Dr. Beeper, right?
Right. Anyway. Yeah, there was such a culture around pagers and beepers back then. Like, you know, you'd get paged and people don't even know what we're talking about, but you get paged and you'd see a phone number on there and you're just like, I don't recognize this number. And then other times you'd get it from somebody that you knew and you're just like, what could they want? It can wait, you know? And there were little codes that you had too, where it's just like, if this is an emergency, you need to pretext it with 911 or put 911 after it, right? To tell me this is really important. You've got to call me back right now. And I'm sure there were other things too, but I do recall that one.
Yeah. Well, the Gwen Stefani "No Doubt" song, "Walking in Your spider webs," right? It's all about using caller ID on a landline phone.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, it's still a catchy song, but if you listen to the lyrics, right, like, you're like, there's so many people that are not understanding what this song is all about.
Yeah.
In a similar way. Yeah. I mean, another avenue of music for me was ska music, which was going on parallel to my obsession with Switchfoot. But Switchfoot continues, unfortunately, in many ways. Ska is only, it's a novelty item at this moment.
Similar to pagers.
I still love it. Exactly. Yeah. Pagers and ska. I mean, they really do kind of go hand in hand. Yeah. Caller ID.
I'm preferential to that version of Gwen Stefani's art than her newer stuff. Well, now old stuff, but when she went solo, I was just like, this isn't what I liked about Gwen Stefani.
Yeah, no doubt was a great band, but I mean, her superstardom, just the band couldn't keep up with how big of a singular focus was on her.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, you have to go back before that even. I mean, back before Tragic Kingdom to really find them as a true ska band.
Mm-hmm.
It's more new wave by the time it gets to Tragic Kingdom than it is ska. But yeah, I it's kind of like, it's weird calling it new wave in the late 90s, but that's what it was really. And I loved ska music, and I still do. And there were some great Christian ska bands of the era, and I got really into those as well. You know,
What's the
OC
name of
Supertones.
one of them? I may be familiar.
So the Orange County Supertones, Five Iron Frenzy,
I've heard
the
of Five
Insiders, mm-hmm,
Yeah.
the W's, and then there were just legions of copycat bands, or just small time bands that were around for, you know, a few months to a few years, and they just, you know, maybe they went like on one national tour and, you know, in a 15 passenger van, and then they were done, right? So I mean, another reason I got really big into music, apart from, well, I should say how I got into Switchfoot. There used to be these things called CD samplers. And if you would go to a show or subscribe to like some subscription, do you remember subscription service, CD subscription services? Yeah. And then they would send these things out. And there was this thing, I think it was called the 199 Amazing Super Sampler or something like that. And it had all these different Christian artists that were breaking out at the same time. And Switchfoot was on there. And that was, I think, the biggest reason I got into Switchfoot, is that I played that sequence of songs over and over and over again, and I liked the Switchfoot songs that were in there. I think one of them was Chem 6. Is it Chem 6A?
I think so. That album, I think it's called Legend of Chin, I believe.
The Legend of Chin, yeah.
Yeah, I see. I wasn't exposed to Switchfoot prior to the Beautiful Letdown album, and so yeah, I ended up having to go back. But anyway, continue.
Hey, it's great old stuff, and I later met a guy who's actually a country music star. Well, star is maybe an exaggeration, but he's a country musician, internationally touring, in fact.
Okay.
He has like, it's a weird thing. Music in the world today is just a weird thing. I guess it's kind of always been since like the 40s or 50s, where you could become big in another country.
Yes.
So the joke is always, like, we're really big in, you know, some random country, right? But like, it's really and truly the case, right? Like, he's really big in Europe, because he's a country musician, and that's like, you know, they don't have country musicians really.
Right, it's a novelty.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, he grew up, like, I don't know how close of friends he was with the Switchfoot guys, but I mean, he like palled around in that same crew or larger kind of group of guys, and he's a pastor's kid too. So I'm wondering if he has links that I didn't even realize until talking to you today. I didn't realize they were pastor's kids, and I didn't know the ongoing nature of their father's church, and I bet they're still deeply connected to it, and because they all live in San Diego. I mean, it's probably a big reason in hindsight why their music is the way it is, and why it connects to me so much, is the emphasis on community that's just lurking in the background. It's not something that necessarily is front and center in their lyrics, but certainly if you go to their shows and you interact with them, and the more you get to know about them, it's there all through everything. But yeah, I met him in college, and he was talking about, you know, like palling around and, you know, skateboarding or whatever, and going to the Switchfoot show, and it was a very like San Diego thing of that age group at that time. And yeah, and so that was really cool. But yeah, and the Legend of Chin is like, you know, it's got like all these inside references and jokes to those people at that in that place at that time. And so it's hard for like a more mainstream audience to really get into it, but I got into it anyway because it was like all I had, right? I had this CD sampler and maybe like 3 other albums in my entire possession. Yeah, I think the other one was Underwater. It was like Chem 6A and Underwater, and loved those. Eventually got the Legend of Chin album, and I realized, like, in hindsight, I had been at this Christian music festival at a theme park. Used to be a thing back in the day. I don't know if they still do this anymore, but we went up to Magic Mountain. No, Great America. It's called Great America in San Jose, this theme park, and every so often they, have the entire theme park turned into a Christian music festival for like a day or a night. And Switchfoot was at one of these, and I remember being there and really excited about the OC Supertones and going to their show and all these different ska bands. And somebody said, like, Switchfoot was playing here, in this other stage, and I was like, yeah, whatever. I look back on that and think, man, I missed out. It was back when they were still a 3-piece, right? They didn't even have Jerome yet, and it would have been. It was back in the old days. I could have said, I could have been one of those people that's like, I knew them before.
Yeah, I knew them when.
But, right. Like being on the ground floor on it, right? Be all snobbish, looking down your nose at all the people that came later on. But this just gives you an insight to like my priorities were definitely ska music at the time.
You
but
on the wrong horse, I guess. I don't
yeah, bet on the right. Yeah, well, I'm not a musician, so I mean, I palled around with a bunch of people who were, and that's been kind of my journey still to this day, is that I connect with a lot of musicians and I care about music. Although I've confessed my care of music has kind of dwindled as I've gotten older, but I was at that show with a bunch of people who were in a ska band. They were trying to do the Christian ska band thing, and they were looking up to these different groups that were on stage, and they're like, oh, this is amazing, right? These people are doing this thing or that thing, and we want to do that too. And I've had that kind of carry on. So that was one of the things that was going on in the background of my life throughout high school. And then in college, I met some guys that eventually became a touring rock band in the kind of like emo post-punk style. Or power pop would probably be a better. Power pop sounds like such a cheesy, weird name for a genre. It sounds like it's trying too hard, but I mean, it's a decent description of what they are, right? Like, it's like kind of punk influenced pop music, and or like a pop music with an edge, but still accessible to a mainstream audience. Anyway, so they formed a nationally touring rock band, and they still from time to time have kind of resurrected from the dead and put something out. And a lot of them are still really deeply involved in making music to this day. And it was a weird thing for me to be integrated into this indie rock scene, where I would show up, just dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, some sneakers or whatever. And I have no tattoos, no piercings. Like I wouldn't dress up for shows. I wouldn't get my scenester gear on, and I did, a lot of these people that would be at these shows, I mean, they were scenesters, in every way. Like that's how they dressed on a regular basis, or they would really go all out for these shows, and their entire life revolved around the next show that was happening. And I liked the music and I was really into it, but like, I don't know. I was just a square white guy, and I've been a square white guy my whole life. So, but I like the music, and I palled around with these guys, and I have some insight on the like whole national touring thing, which is when you were talking about what Switchfoot does on their tours, is it just makes it 50 times more amazing to know how hard that is to do.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just really rough.
Well, I know, like I only know this from like watching their documentaries and just paying as much attention to any kind of info about them that comes out, you know, just being a fan type, a stalker type fan. uh, Jon is a very like social person. And so I can only imagine how difficult, you know, this time of lockdown is for him. Like he loves being around people and spending time with people. It's where he draws his energy from. So I think he's just a huge extrovert. And so, yeah, as I was saying, it's probably really tough for him right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that helps being as big of an extrovert as apparently he is.
Mm-hmm.
I think my video is lagging behind my own voice a little bit, but I'll try not to look at myself, and then it won't throw me off as much. Yeah. But when you're a part of a band, like it's almost like being in a, well, nowadays, like because of the way the weird culture is going, you know, a polyamorous relationship is like out there in the,
right.
But anyway, it's like being married to like 5 people or 6,
Mm-hmm.
however many. And, you know, so some people are extroverted and some people aren't in the band. And it's this really weird dynamic that as a touring band, you have to work through.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all the complexity that you might imagine being part of a family or being in a marriage or, you know, trying to be in a really close knit church community. It's got all the depth, but it also has all of the potential strife.
Mm. Well, yeah, you hear about bands breaking up so often, right? Like it's this thing that Switchfoot has done. You know, I know they've had a couple different members here and there, but they've been able to stay together for what, better part of 2 decades now, maybe even longer. And that's not normal. That's not common.
Right. And so we were talking about Gwen Stefani earlier. I mean, there's a reason why it's easier at a certain point for a solo artist to make it work, because then it's only the solo artist and his or her needs that get catered to, and everybody else is just a replaceable option. And you just fill out the band with whatever kind of mercenary musicians. And I don't mean to downplay, like, a lot of these musicians are really, really good musicians, but like, they're not like a part of the band, right? I mean, they're merely the band for this show, or the band for this leg of the tour, or a band for a tour, right? And then, or a band for this album, right? And it all becomes really, really optional. But it's really hard to make a band work relationally over a long period of time. And yeah, it is a testament to how awesome Switchfoot is that every member that they've added in, they've never kicked them out, basically. So I mean, they added Jerome, and ever since Jerome came on board, he's just been a permanent member ever since. And then they added Drew Shirley, who I think for a time was one of these. I mean, they did have the mercenary lead guitar player, because at some point Jon Foreman decided he wanted to be able to, like, you know, hold the microphone with both hands and walk around and jump off of speakers and crowd surf and all that kind of fun stuff. Is much harder to do if you have a musical instrument responsibility.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
So they wanted to offload, you know, the guitar playing to somebody else, and I don't know who all they may have had in the lead guitar position for a while, but you know, when they eventually settled on Drew Shirley, like, he's been there ever since. And they clearly love the guy. I mean, yeah. So it's a big deal. I mean, even the people that were the original members of the band, like, when you start a band as young as they did, you don't really know how life is going to go and how that's going to work. But they've been really committed to each other, and I think a lot of it helps that they're all living in the same place. Because it's just tough when you're a nationally touring band and you're just so floaty. Like, you just don't really have a base of operations. Like, you don't have this place where you really call home. And yeah, and it's funny because I noticed most of the songs that my friends in this nationally touring band would like the songs would be about being on tour basically and not having a home. And then like a few of the songs would be like one of their most favorite one of their songs from one album is just called Home, and it's all about like daring to settle down. Um, yeah, and that's basically what ended the band at a certain point. It's like they met people that would become their wives, and then they all spread out to these different places where their wives lived. And that was basically the end of the band.
Hmm. Yeah, that's what's
Which,
interesting. They all live in
yeah.
the same place for Switchfoot. They're, you know, they have kids and they have wives, and they're all like in the same San Diego area.
Yeah, yeah, and it's fun. It's ironic that we're talking, you know, over the internet, over distance, right? We're hundreds of miles away from each other. We're having this conversation, and the Discord, and you know, Randos United channel, and Paul's Jordan Peterson. I mean, it's connecting people in all of these funny, physically displaced ways, though.
Yeah.
And it's also, we're in the midst of this coronavirus quarantine that is probably going to only intensify in the next couple of weeks, and may linger for quite a while.
Yeah.
I hope I'm not alarming anybody, but I mean, it's going to be several months of something like this. Maybe not this level of intensity, but
Yeah.
it's going to be a while. And I'm saying all this, and I'm enjoying this you know, I'm loving it, but it's super important. It's one of my core beliefs is that the physicality, geography, right? Meeting people face to face in person
Mm-hmm.
is just so huge to life. It makes all the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it's why I've made some of the big life choices that I have made. And I think it explains, once you have that belief, for me, it allows me, explains why other things don't work out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the way that you've explained that the village does church, I mean, that just sounds like something that I've been longing for. So if you guys could just do me a favor and move it over here to
You know, what's funny is that for a very long time, and it still is a little bit to me right now. I'm starting to appreciate the desert for the first time in 20 years, but I hate the desert. I really I don't like Tucson very much in a lot of ways. It's not my ideal climate. It's not my ideal city. I loved being, the two places that I lived before this were San Luis Obispo, California,
Mm-hmm.
which is endlessly beautiful, gorgeous place, like really close to the coast. It's like, you know, it's everybody's dream location in a lot of ways. And then the other place I lived was Boulder, Colorado, and it's you know, the other version of everybody's dream location, right? It's on the slopes of these beautiful mountains that get covered in, you know, champagne snow is what they call it, right? And because it's all light and fluffy and perfect to ski in, and right, it's this. So people started to call it in grad school this snow globe of a town, right? It's just so perfect that you could put it inside of a snow globe, right? And right, and then I'm like, okay, so but where am I going to live? Well, I mean, one gut reaction is, well, it can't be Tucson because I hate that place, right? But when I think about the people and the church, then it's a whole different matter. So, you know, I'm extremely committed to being here and being a part of this church. And it's funny, you say like, what, you know, do the church move to Boulder? Like, would you always say this? Why can't you guys just like move up to Boulder, or maybe we could like go start the church in Flagstaff, Arizona, which is a city that's kind of, it's like the third major city in Arizona, and it's like a lot like Boulder. And but we're here, and we're committed to being here, and it's actually one of the things that we've grown and developed as a church from when I first came here. There was a lot of people my age in college, where my stage of life, and Eric, our pastor, challenged us very particularly on very many occasions to make a commitment to be here, and preached out of Isaiah and Jeremiah about the Israelites, you know, settling down and basically daring to put down roots in a place where they were even exiles. And talks about them, you know, marrying and having kids and planting gardens, right? And then being committed to the good of their city. And even while they're in exile in Babylon. And we've done that. We've literally planted gardens. At this point, we have a bunch of produce that really needs to be picked at our church. And there are way too many kids, and we took him maybe a little too seriously. And yeah, but I mean, it's amazing to look back on these people, and it really is amazing how we have stuck together. And some of us have left, like myself, and then come back. And yeah, if the church moves, like we'll all move. I think if it's not going to happen, but if say there was some really good reason why we needed to move to Dallas, because Jeff's there, we need to go, right? Like we need to go get Jeff, right? Yeah, well, you know, sillier things have been done. So yeah, we would all move. Like I have no doubt that if there was some reason why our entire church needed to pick up and move, we would all do it, or a lot of us anyway. It's we're that committed to each other. And you know, there's a lot of pitfalls to that. I don't mean to put us up on this giant pedestal, but I think it's the right way to do things despite the difficulty of it. Yeah.
It sounds fascinating. It really does.
Yeah, and I've learned this over time. I mean, I've been drawn to it because of my struggles with depression. So in order to get outside of my own head, I have to go to a place or be part of a group of people that's going to pull me out of myself. And so going to L'Abri was a big change. There's been a few people that have been associated with L'Abri that have been kind of talking to Paul Vander Klay here and there. Yeah, Bern. Actually, I met Bern while I was there. He was a guest speaker and like visiting scholar or whatever for a time while I was there. So yeah, I met Bern, hung out with him, slipped and fell in the snow and ice with him in Switzerland and in the Alps. So yeah, I know Bern kind of well. I haven't kept in touch, but I mean, but yeah, I've been meaning to talk with Bern. I'd like to talk with Bern at some point about how he thinks of community and what he thinks L'Abri is all about, because for a lot of people, L'Abri has been kind of the intellectual output that they've given to the world, the books that they publish, the ideas that they put forward. And it is that. But what I found there is that it's the Christian community that's going on. So for a lot of people that go to L'Abri, it's like, I think I used this phrase not too long ago in another conversation, but it's like the speed bump on the way out of the parking lot of faith. Does that make sense? Like, yeah. It's like the last ditch effort to maybe stay in faith, like stay in Christianity. And so people go there because they just like, well, the church has been terrible, right? I've got all these doubts. And usually those two things are really closely connected for people, right? It's not just that I have these intellectual doubts that come out of nowhere, but I have these intellectual doubts on top of or because of the terrible way that I see people in the church behaving, or the way that the church is as a structure or something like that. And you go to L'Abri and you live with a bunch of people who are not necessarily better people, because a lot of, like the majority of people are going to be all these people, right, that are hurt and moody and doubting, and a lot of times kind of lashing out. So the majority of the people are there, but the ethos of the place just kind of captures you, or at least it did for me. I mean, some people, they see something going on, but it's not enough to keep them, it's only a speed bump out. By the time you get there, you have lots of reasons to be headed out of faith, for many people. But I realized what was going on there, and I was like, oh man, this is what's needed, right? You need community living is the way to go. And so I was primed for that, looking for that when I arrived in Tucson, and that's why the village just made sense to me. And I've been looking for those kind of opportunities, both to be part of groups like that ever since, and also to create them. And my buying the house across the street from Eric is well, I was about to say small, but it's not really small. I mean, it's small and big at the same time. It's just me making this decision with my wife, and Eric, I guess, likes it, but he didn't really have any choice. I had the money to buy it,
Right.
I had the bank approval to buy the house, right? You can't stop me.
Can't stop.
Right. But I mean, I was going to say it was small, but it is pretty big, because I mean, you have to, have a mortgage, right? Like a bank said, yeah, you're approved for this much, and you buy this house. Like, that's a big deal. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess I could sell the house, but buying and selling houses is a pretty big step. So yeah, it's what I'm all about.
I was curious how did you find out about Labrie, and what led you there?
Yeah, so basically stuff like this that you're involved with, honestly. I mean, like, how do people hear about Paul Vander Klay? Well, I mean, there's a very clear online presence, but I think Labrie has kind of always worked the same way. So Labrie doesn't advertise at all. In fact, it's one of their core values, their principles, is that they do not advertise. They don't pay to put their name out there. But they do have a website. You can go find them, labrie.org. And but it's all word of mouth. So somebody goes, and then they tell the other people when they get back about this place. And a friend of mine had been studying computer engineering just like me, and was miserable just like me. And he had gone to Labrie outside Boston. There's more than one location.
Oh,
a lot of people saw what was going on with the original Labrie, and they're like, this is gold. Let's do this somewhere else. And I totally understand that. Like, that's still potentially a life project of mine, is to start a Labrie. I don't know if it'll be, officially Labrie, but I think the village is building towards something like that eventually. Anyway, so he came back, and he was just transformed. He was a new guy, and he had purpose and focus with what he wanted to do with his life. He was done with computer engineering, but he decided, I'm going to be a doctor, and he went for that really confidently. And he saw what I was going through, and I was talking to him, and he's like, I think you should just go to Labrie. and he convinced me. I had no idea what he was talking. I mean, I had only an inkling of an idea of what he was talking about at this place, Labrie, but it didn't really matter to me. I just saw how he was and the effect it had on him. So I figured I'd figure it out when I got there. Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of people do when they show up to Labrie. They don't really know what it is, or what it'll be like. I mean, you can hear some things, or even if people tell you, it's not quite clear what that means. Like, if I told you, well, it's kind of like a study center, and it's kind of like a commune, but you should go, right? Right? Like, that doesn't tell you much. I mean, it tells you something. Like, it's true. Those are true statements, but it's different when you get there. Or maybe it's not different, but I mean, it's just like explaining it. But the reason people get convinced is they know the person that went, right? I mean, when I went and met Byrne was there the time I went, like, there were like 5 kids about my age, in the early 20s, late teens, and they were all there because Byrne told them to go. And that was it. Like, they were like, okay, I'm sold. Byrne told me, so I'm going. Yeah.
When did it first start? I don't know a ton about it. The first that I ever heard about it was I guess in somewhere in my early 20s. I think it was right around the time that I started reading C.S. Lewis and looking at some different apologetics type stuff, that I stumbled onto Francis Schaeffer because somebody recommended it. And I read one of his books, and it didn't really grab me, so I never got into Francis Schaeffer, but I knew I had heard tangentially then about Labrie, but I really didn't know a whole lot about it. So did he start it, or was it around before Schaeffer?
No, it was Schaefer's thing, and it grew really organically from just Schaefer as a person. So he didn't live exactly the same place in the Swiss Alps as the breed now exists, but when it first get going in the way I'm about to tell the story, but he was living somewhere nearby, kind of it's like the eastern side of Switzerland, right around Lake Geneva. Absolutely gorgeously beautiful place. Um, and he was living somewhere nearby, and his daughters were starting to go off to college, and they would bring back college friends and roommates to the house for, like, Thanksgiving, other holidays kind of thing.
Mhm.
And he was just really impressive to these friends of his daughters, because they would ask him questions, the kind of questions that we're interested in on the Discord and with Paul Vander Klay and Jordan Peterson. It was just a very wide-ranging, meandering kind of thing. Like, what do you think about this? And what does this have to do with the gospel? And what is meaningful? What's purposeful? What's worthwhile in life, right? And he was a Christian minister, and like a super conservative Christian minister, but he was just very open to having these discussions with people, and not, it's just very refreshing, I guess, in the time period. But it still is today, because I definitely experience it. I think a lot of us definitely experience it when somebody doesn't tell you, oh, that's a dumb question, or like, you shouldn't be asking that, or even if they don't say that, because like having that kind of nonverbal attitude towards you, even
Yeah.
when people don't do that, it's amazing. So he got this reputation for being comfortable with people asking questions that made other people uncomfortable, and just talking with them and saying what he thought, and then carrying on a conversation.
Mhm.
Um, and it eventually grew to this thing where, like, people would go seek him out, and it wasn't like he decided, I'm going to do this. It just, like, word got out, and it eventually coincided with the whole Jesus people movement, right? The Christianized version of the hippies.
Mhm.
Um, and people heard about Francis Schaeffer and what he was up to, and just like I told you, with like just completely word of mouth, people went to Switzerland because they wanted to hang out with Francis Schaeffer, who apparently wouldn't be scared of your question, and hang around with a bunch of people who were also likewise interested in stuff like that. And they just they had people sleeping on floors, in the dozens, just like their houses in Switzerland, and they would just have, I don't know, dozens of hippies just hanging out at the house. And that's how it got started. And it's a lot more formalized today, but that's the roots of it, and it stays pretty true to those roots. People
Mhm.
come from all over. I mean, it's English speaking, so it's not. There have been Labries that have kind of branched out in different places in Europe, but in a lot of ways, it's still a pretty expatriate phenomenon, like American expatriate. Although, anywhere in the English speaking world, I met people from Australia, New Zealand, England, the Netherlands, because apparently every Dutch person nowadays speaks English really well. The United States, Canada, South Africa, but there's there were some people here and there from Germany and South Korea and a few other places. Yeah, and that's how it got started. I mean, and then all along, Schaeffer's writing books like you heard of and maybe picked up for a moment. I mean, I know you're a huge C.S. Lewis fan, and if I had to pick one, it's not even a close contest. I mean, C.S. Lewis is definitely the better writer, the probably the more precise and astute thinker. But I mean, there's still a lot that's valuable to Schaeffer's writing and ideas. It's not nearly as engaging as Lewis is, but I think what's really cool about what Schaeffer did is really this. I mean, what we've been talking about.
Mhm.
It really isn't the publishing or the output, as good as that is. You know, Lewis doesn't have a Lewisian, you know, center
Right.
where, you know, where people, and this is, I think, one thing that Paul Vander Klay has been trying to hammer, you know, again and again and again, is like, okay, so you got this Jordan Peterson phenomenon. I mean, Jordan Peterson is probably as profound as Lewis. But is he going to be like Lewis, or is he going to leave a legacy like Schaefer did, as far as an institution, right?
Right.
As far as an ongoing group of people, right? I mean, to make another comparison, like it's kind of between Freud and Jung, right? Like, so Freud put out some fantastic ideas, or at least, well, I don't know if they call fantastic, might not be the right word, but extremely influential, important ideas. But Jung, like, had a movement, right? He had a group of people who, like, they're still Jungians to this day, right? That they have a way of life, right, that they're trying to continue on. So yeah, I mean, I love that potentially because I can never get around to actually publishing anything myself. Like, it's I have this giant block that I'll have to, well, hopefully eventually figure out about why I can't do that. But that's how I ended up with a master's and not a PhD in philosophy. It's not, couldn't keep going down that road. But hopefully I can be a lesser thinker who helps build the institution behind the scenes.
Well, if you're a lesser thinker, then I'm the least of these.
No, yeah, right. No, I mean, look, I recognize I'm plenty smart, but I'm not going to have the kind of output that a lot of my peers in graduate school are doing. I mean, they're going to become famous superstars of academia, and that's great. I mean, that's fantastic. I don't really want that anyway. But yeah, I'm happy being a lesser thinker. It's better for me this way. It really is. It's not just a consolation prize. It is actually something that I think is worthwhile.
So we talked about C.S. Lewis a little bit, and we had made that connection too on the Discord. I had a question in mind, and I just lost it. I was going to ask, I think, what was your first exposure to Lewis, and what is it about Lewis that you like most?
Oh gosh, man. The guy's got to be one of the best writers of the 20th century. I don't think that's. I think I'm confident in saying that. He has an elegance with language that surpasses almost every other writer of the 1900s. I mean, he's just that good. And he's got the depth of intellect to make that really interesting, right? So he's not simply just telling stories, but he's conveying ideas through story. And some people find him a little bit too on the nose with the ideas, right? Or the stories slightly disguised, right? Ideas slightly disguised as stories. But I think that's kind of where my taste in art goes. Like, I don't like art that's too subtle. I like art that kind of, you know, hits me in the head, smacks me in the face a little bit, right? I mean, I want something that's gonna, like, I don't want something that I'm gonna have to be like, now really, what does it mean, right? So I think he does that really well. And even if you think something's too on the nose, I've noticed that even people that react kind of violently negatively to Lewis, they're nevertheless still captivated by the story even years later. So I have tons of friends that grew up with, in this very similar way that I'm about to describe, reading the Chronicles of Narnia, having it be bedtime story read from my parents, you know, watching the BBC low production value
Yes.
versions of the Chronicles of Narnia stories. Well, on it must have been some youth group trip or something or other, where we had one of those vans that had a like one of those miniature buses that had like a TV with a VHS
Yes.
player, right? And I remember things like that. And so, I mean, I was steeped in the Chronicles of Narnia growing up in the church and in the family that I did. And I have tons of friends who likewise did the same, who became some pretty angry atheists later in life, but they nevertheless were just still so captivated by everything that Lewis had put out. Just loved it. Good friend of mine who was one of the more angry atheists I think I've met in my entire life. Just would love talking to me about C.S. Lewis's space trilogy, and just like telling me about stuff that I even hadn't read about Lewis. Oh, well, wait till you read this thing, or oh man, this is so good, right? So it stuck with them, and that's really impressive, right? That you could have people that are diametrically opposed to you say, this is fantastic, right? This is high art, right? And this is great storytelling. This is like the best presentation of these ideas, even though I don't agree with them, right? This is the best presentation of them. So yeah, I think that's my story with Lewis. I don't think I'm nearly as deep of a Lewis fan. I think you've got me beat on Lewis and Switchfoot at this point, but I did want to compare.
Well, since it's a competition, I'm glad I won.
It's always a competition.
Did I lose you? You're frozen. You're frozen up on my screen. Oh, I think my internet.
Well, I'll be back in a minute because it's good on my side.
Okay.
So
yeah,
I'm still here.
Yeah. I can see you again now.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's been constant for me. So.
Okay, good. I was looking for something here because I came across a little C.S. Lewis poem that I had never heard before. I posted it on the Discord, but let's see if I can find it. Hang on just a second.
Okay. Yeah. I'll see if I can pull it up if you give me the name.
Let's see. I don't even know what the name of it is. Yeah, it was brought to my attention. I was listening to an interview and somebody paraphrased it, and I'm like, I've never heard that before. Let me go see if I can find that. So here it is. I don't know the name of it or where it's published, but it goes like this. Master, they say that when I seem, let me back up. It's about prayer. And it was, when I heard it talked about, it was delivered in the context of, well, what do you say to people who say that prayer is dumb? You're not really talking to anybody. You're just talking to yourself. It's all, fake. So they reference this poem, and Lewis says, Master, they say that when I seem to be in speech with you, since you make no replies, it's all a dream, one talker aping two. They are half right, but not as they imagine. Rather, I seek in myself the things I meant to say, and lo, the wells are dry. Then, seeing me empty, you forsake the listener's roll, and through my dead lips breathe into utterance wake the thoughts I never knew. And thus you neither need reply, nor can, thus while we seem two talking, thou art one forever, and I no dreamer, but thy dream. And so I just thought that was so cool because he was talking about how, okay, you might be right. It might just be one person talking here, but it's not in the way that you think it is. It's actually this God that you don't think exists that's actually doing all of the talking and is talking through me. I'm much less real than this being that's doing the talking here.
Right. a hard one to flip the switch in a way. So I think Lewis sometimes does a really good job of explaining this, and I'm going to use a different philosopher's language, but the paradigm shift that theism, Christian theism in particular, really is compared to, and most of the time in our culture, some kind of atheism, whether it's the heavy, angry version or the kind of more light, like I don't really know, version of atheism. But yeah, from the outside looking in, this is exactly what people are seeing, right? You're praying, but I mean, what different is how different is that from, you know, my New Age or Buddhist inspired meditation, right? Right, you're simply just doing an internal process that is helping you calm down or focus or whatever the benefit, right? The kind of self-help benefit that you get from doing this stuff. But yeah, there are these moments that at least I claim to have experienced with prayer where I do think that I'm hearing something back, whether that's in a personal time of individual prayer, or more so, I think, in a more community driven prayer, that I can totally relate to what Lewis is talking about, is that you have these experiences where, yeah, you're talking, but then sometimes you run out of your talking, you can't talk anymore. You got nothing else that you haven't expressed. And the really big moments of prayer, in my experience, are when you think you're hearing something. And it could be that we're just deluded. I mean, that's what I mean. It's like, it's this paradigm shift, right? If you want to dig your heels in on the atheist position, I mean, you can dig your heels in all day long. I mean, I don't know what's going to really budge you intellectually speaking, but because there's plenty of alternative explanations for what I claim to be experiencing in prayer. But I nevertheless claim it and believe it to be true. Believe it to be true. I think I even know it, right? So it's a dangerous word to use in philosophy, right? Yeah, and I think Lewis captures the experience really beautifully. This is what he's so good at, right? And he's just a master at crafting words.
Yeah, Malcolm Guite, who is, I believe, an Anglican minister, and Paul has featured some of his clips on his channel before. He talked about how he thinks that Lewis's poetry is so much more profound than even some of his great, I can't think of the right.
Yeah, his great works of literature, right?
Yeah, his great works of literature, or even, his prose. I don't know if that's the right term.
Yeah, he has essays, right? His philosophical treatises. I mean, he's got some of those, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just starting to stumble into some more of his poetry now. I've started reading the first things that I could find that he ever published, and both of them were poetic works. And on the Randos channel, Sherry from the Discord, and who's also talked to Paul, and I have worked through some poems from his first book. His first book was just a collection of poems, and then his second book is one narrative poem, which I've read, and I haven't really gotten into the depths or finding a lot of appreciation yet per se in that narrative poem, but just seeing a poem like this, I can see what Guite was talking about. And there's another one that he sticks in, I want to say it's in Miracles. I want to say it's at the very beginning of Miracles, where he just tells this story in poetic fashion of this meteor that hits the earth. And I can't even really, you just have to read it to sense of what he's doing with it. But
yeah, poetry is like that. Yeah. Right? If you could put it in prose, you probably would have, right?
Right.
Yeah.
If I could explain it, then I'm destroying it. And I think that's an issue with a lot of life and a lot of the things that are profound about existence is if you can start to break it apart and just describe it at each level that you dissect, you start to lose, like what's the saying, something about the sum of the parts, or the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And as you start breaking all of the parts down, you just begin to lose. And perhaps in some sense you understand better, but you might be missing the forest for the trees as you start to just inspect every little speck of a thing as you've broken it down. And I think that something about this ties together with you can say, well, this is all that prayer is, and you can explain things away, but I feel like you could do that with just about anything, right? Well, all that's happening is you're just setting you're just calming yourself down, you're doing a practice, and there's nothing more to it than that. And then, I could just easily come at that from another angle and say, well, what does that mean though? Who are you? Who is doing the settling? I think there's an infinite depth of not being able to understand what it is that we mean when we say certain things. There's a depth that you can go to where it's just like, well, you are taking a lot of things for granted when you are explaining it in this way. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but it just seems to
made perfect sense. Yeah.
Seems to me that you can explain anything away depending on what your presuppositions already are. Again, don't know if that makes sense, but that's the way it appears to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm completely on board with everything that you said. I don't know I think the only thing I would have hesitance to say is that if you go to explain it, you're destroying it. I don't know if to go so far, if I could go that far, but I get what you're saying. Like you're certainly reducing something by offering an explanation.
Maybe what I mean, maybe destroying is too strong of a word, but
well, others have said that. You're not the first.
Well, maybe what I mean by it is, I'm running off in different directions here, but I think I saw you say on the Discord that you're high in openness and also high in is it disagreement? I can't remember.
Yep, that's exactly right. That's what just happened here.
Yeah. No, but I think that's good. I am high in agreeableness. I'm very high in agreeableness. And I want to say I'm low in conscientiousness. I would have to go back and look at it. But so I'm always concerned about, I always see everybody else's perspective. So if somebody disagrees with me, I don't immediately just say, no, you're wrong. I say, let me see it from your perspective. That you are probably catching something that needs correction in me. So I'm gonna go in that direction. And so that's why I was so apt to jump in and say, well, maybe destroy was too strong of a word, because I'm starting to analyze now what I think. And perhaps what I mean is there is a certain quality that you can lose if you become hyper-focused on reducing things down and analyzing each piece. And I think there's certainly a value in that, but it just depends on where it lies on your hierarchy of what's most important.
Right. Byrne is really big on this. One of the guys that was the head of the L'Abri in Switzerland for a long time and was when I was there, is huge on this. The danger of reductionism is what I think the way he usually phrases it, right? Like, and there's a big reason why these two guys who are so involved with L'Abri think this way is that Schaefer was big on pointing this out. And he was an extremely conservative Christian, both socially, morally, politically, and theologically, but it doesn't usually go together that somebody like him would have such a high appreciation for art, but he did. And he made a really big deal of it in his writings, and certainly to the people that came and visited him at L'Abri. And one of the things that he claimed over and over and over again is that art is actually prior to philosophy. That was a big claim. Now, I don't know if I'm 100% on board with it, but that was what Schaeffer certainly put to the forefront. And for very much the same reason as you just articulated, is that art has so much more meaning than what philosophy can capture. As soon as you start doing philosophy, right, then you're trying to put into prose, right, give a really rationalized understanding of something, right? And you do that at the expense of maybe some other aspect of the art. And then you, like you said, lose the forest for the trees, right? You get really into your nitty-gritty philosophy, and you've missed some other aspect of the experience of the art by doing so. So I don't know that it destroys the art. In fact, the art is still there, but you maybe miss it now.
Right.
You don't see it as well anymore if you get hyper-focused on the prose explanation of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a Lewis essay called "Meditations in a Tool Shed," and that YouTube channel, C.S. Lewis Doodle. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not.
I haven't yet. No, I haven't seen that. Maybe I'll go check it out.
So they recently did a version. They did a treatment of that essay, and it. Oh man, it makes it so much more rich to watch them like draw out the different concepts and ideas that Lewis is writing about as he's doing these things. But one of the points that he makes in that essay, and I know he's made it in other places too, is you can't at the same time analyze an experience and have the experience.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the examples that he uses, but you can't. Oh, what's a good example? Well,
I mean, I've got an example. Yeah, so you see this all the time, and various people, like, it's a wide-ranging observation that people have made, is that, we've got this device right here that's a camera, right? Mm-hmm. So I either can experience the moment, or I can take a picture of it. Mm-hmm. But if I take out my camera and I start thinking about how to make the ideal shot, right? Is the lighting right? Is this really truly capturing the experience? I'm outside the experience now, right? Yeah. I'm not actually experiencing, and this is one of the things that I've noticed at Switchfoot shows. There's actually a good little connection, right? Just like any other show, it doesn't matter if it's Switchfoot or not, but a lot of people are like, well, it's really paradoxical, because they're like, I don't want to miss this experience, right? I want to be able to revisit it later. But by doing what they need to do to record it, to experience it later, they are missing it. So it's this weird thing where, people put up their phones at concerts, right? Mm. Like, and this is this trade-off that you have your finger on, that Greg Lowry is the guy I was talking about earlier with L'Abri. Mm-hmm. I remember him talking about this endlessly at the time, and he's talked about it since, is this idea of image versus imagination, or experiencing versus, capturing the experience. It's this really weird paradoxical thing that many philosophers and artists and comedians before us have pointed out, but I think it's really true. Yeah.
I think a good example, I think this was one of Lewis's examples that just came to mind, is you can't think about the act of reading while reading something. You can't think about, oh, I'm looking at this letter and I'm piecing these letters together to form, to recognize this word that the author was using. And you can't also think, well, I'm using my eyeballs right now and I'm thinking about how eyeballs work as I'm reading this. Now, that does happen to me sometimes, not that specifically, but while I'm reading, I do start thinking about something else, but then I'm no longer, paying attention to what's going on and what I'm reading. But I also find that phenomenon that the example that you just used about, um, capturing a moment versus experiencing a moment, right? The people at the concerts try to do both. I feel like that phenomenon happens a little bit, and this would tie back to why the in-person is so important of these conversations, right?
Yes.
Us recording this right now, and even just in the back of our minds, thinking about the possibility that this could go out and other people could see it, and what are people going to think? It does alter the flavor or the tenor of our conversation a little bit, at least from my perspective. I don't know if anybody experiences this. I think there's some kind of theory out there as well about how people act when they know that there's a camera on versus how they do when they don't. And I feel like to a certain extent that happens here. And the Rebel Wisdom channel has one episode out there where I think they had their first live event together, and I think Brett Weinstein and his or Weinstein and his wife
right.
Heather Heying and somebody else was there. I can't remember who exactly it was. But anyway, they filmed the first part of the session, and then they said, now we're intentionally turning off the cameras because we want to allow for more freedom for people to actually discuss and get their real thoughts out there without concern for, the fact that this could be heard somewhere else, or this could be,
Right.
this could be broadcast someplace or become viral or something like that. And I think that just does change the way conversations go as well. So again, that ties back to the importance of being able to have, face to face, in person. This is the only record that this is on is the other human consciousness that I'm interacting with, or the group of the humans that are together. But this isn't being quote unquote recorded in any other way.
Right. No, I think you're 100% right. I mean, yeah, it's true. Although, you can still push past some of that if you get really engaged in certain ways. It's funny. I think one of my favorite interviewers right now, maybe my favorite at the moment, is a guy who makes people eat insanely spicy chicken wings while he interviews them. And so, the people know that they're doing, a promo thing for their movie or whatever, but
Right.
They can't focus on that and keep up the persona because they're eating these insanely hot, spicy chicken wings, right? And so they're pulled out of, right? It's why he has the gimmick, right? It's why it works, right?
Yeah.
You need to have somebody that's going to crack that shell,
Right.
something or some, but yeah, our church just started doing a podcast called Healing the City. That's kind of like our church motto: healing the city one person at a time. It's the full motto. So the podcast is called Healing the City, and it's really been just individual conversations, much like we're doing with individual church members. And I think we started thinking it was going to be like for the wider world in some way, like we were going to offer something out to people outside the church. And maybe we do that. I don't know who actually listens, but it's been really awesome just for our own church to realize things about each other that we didn't know. But we run into that same dynamic. Like you sit down for the podcast and people are like, oh, you've got this microphone in front of you, right? And
a lot of
you're
pressure.
in this recording studio and you're like, oh man, like you got these headphones on, right? So like this is a production, right? But the person I was interviewing with is a longtime friend of mine who means a lot to me, and she was asking me these questions, and I was going back to these experiences, some of which I told you today in kind of a shorter form, but she kind of popped me out of I just was having a really in-depth conversation with her. I was so focused on that, and also trying to articulate as best as I could this experience that I was kind of replaying in my head. So yeah, I got outside of the little recording studio bubble.
Yeah.
And that can still happen, but you're right. There's something really valuable about just not having that around.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not there at all. And it's what makes being at Labrie different than what we're doing. As valuable as what we're doing is, right? Or being on the Discord server, or you know, any of these other things, right? It's just, there's something way bigger. Maybe in some of the same way that you're talking about the art, right? I think this is how we got here, right? In your mind, right? The art versus the philosophy that tries to articulate what the art is doing.
Mm-hmm.
There's something very different about being at a community like Labrie, a church, a physical church that's meeting, or, you know, internet church, right? Like,
Yeah.
and look, hey, if internet church is all we got for the time being, you know, I'm going to embrace it as much as I can, you know, I'm going to go for it full bore. But yeah, I think we miss out on an even bigger thing that's going on when we're in person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. I really do like that model that you guys have, that you've explained to me. Now, we have had in the churches that I've gone to, and the one that I go to right now, where sometimes, you know, a microphone will get passed around, but it's in like a very tight context. Now, there, you know, it could break wide open and kind of go wide ranging, but it's just, you know, sometimes the microphone would just be passed around and just say, hey, tell us, you know, what you're dealing with, or tell us, you know, what's on your heart, or something like that. But just the one where it's like, okay, well, you know, tell us what maybe you heard. And I don't know if this is the context of how the microphone is passed around with Q&A, or, you know, but it would just be interesting to me, because I've also been in Pentecostal backgrounds where it's just like, you know,
Yeah.
tell us what you're hearing out of this message, you know.
Ooh, man. Yeah. I've been there too.
Yeah.
It's not the context I grew up in necessarily, but I've been in those experiences, those kind of meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I know what you're talking about.
Just interesting. I could see as a
Yeah, well, it
oh,
could fly off the rails. Sorry, we got a little delay. Keep going.
I could just see as like a church leader how it could be kind of scary. Yeah, where it's just like, all right, let's pass the mic and see what happens.
Right. So it's not, so we have these values, right? And one of them I've mentioned is accessibility, and another is authenticity. I don't think it's actually like one of our stated values, but I mean, somewhere in the background, one of our values is amateurism, as in like, Eric sometimes says it as reinventing the wheel. Like, so like the adage is like, don't reinvent the wheel, like take whatever somebody has done and you don't have to do it again. And kind of our way of thinking is, actually you need to do it from scratch yourself, because otherwise, so it's connected to authenticity, but it's also about making sure that we don't prize the production too much.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I do at the church is I often am the person that runs the soundboard, like plays with all the little electronic doodads,
Yeah.
so that you can hear people, you know, that are running microphones and, you know, playing music and all this kind of stuff. And I learned to do that in a church where it was very much a production, like extremely professional. Like
Yep.
they are good at what they do.
Right.
And I don't want to downplay the good aspect of, like, they really make like a good show.
Excellent was very important. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So it's weird, but what we're saying at our church is we don't want that. Like on purpose, don't like mess it up a little bit. Make sure it's not like, don't rehearse too much, you know, like because then you miss out on the risk and the the space that people can just be honest about what they're going through and what their questions are. And you don't want them thinking about the fact that it was so well recorded last time I listened to it. You want them thinking like, this might not even make the recording because we probably forgot to turn it on, right? Like,
Yeah.
right? Like, you want it to be kind of slapdash to a certain extent, and you want that possibility of it just falling apart.
That's a part of the authenticity. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, you need to have a little bit of that, at least a little bit. And we kind of try to bake it into our DNA. No, maybe it's just an excuse that we're not good at certain things. But even if that's true, then it has these side benefits, I think, of opening up people to be able to say what they really think. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a good example because I haven't been looking for it. I haven't been paying attention to it. But I mean, if you go to the church website and you listen to sermons, many of the sermons have the Q&A as part of the recording.
Okay.
I should ask Eric if there's one that's really juicy, like one where it's like somebody is really like angry about what was said or something. Yeah. And so I could tell you to go listen to sometimes how it goes off sometimes. I wouldn't say it's the norm, but I mean, things are said in sermons that make people mad, or make people really grief stricken. I mean, there's all kinds of, and those are not invalid responses, right? Like those are real. And so it's not always the time and place to do it, but you kind of have to like open up opportunities where the time and place is not quite right in order to have it happen at all.
Yeah.
I guess that's what I'm getting at. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's things like that if there is no forum for it at all, like you said, if they don't get to happen, it's not like they just go away or that they don't exist, right? And I think that there's a lot of there are a lot of things that are unspoken for people who have gone to church for a long time or grew up in church, and because they didn't feel like they had a forum to express it, they end up leaving church. And that's what I like about these conversations that we're able to have is it feels like a whole forum has been opened up for people to talk about maybe some things that they either felt silly at maybe best for talking about and feel just completely ostracized at worst, for talking about. And that's what I like about the whole Paul Vander Klayosphere and able to have the conversations on the Discord. People sometimes get fiery on there too, but at least people.
Yeah, no, I saw it happen a couple times already. I haven't been there long. Yeah.
So I don't know. I like it, and I like the opportunity to get to meet, new people like you and be able to have these conversations. And yeah, I might start digging into some more of the Village Church and see if there are different ideas that I can bring to the church community that I'm in right now to see if they're interested in doing. I also do like the idea of a church podcast. The church that my wife leads at, they have their own podcast. And so, I mean, I think it's something that, especially in this time, that people could really take advantage of, because, there's a lot of people with, the people who are fortunate, at least during all this, have some time on their hands now. And they need things to focus their attention on that could, be beneficial. And so I think the opportunity is ripe right now for, take advantage is probably the wrong word, but for churches to provide something that could be really helpful for people, especially at this time.
Yeah. No, I think you're exactly right. Getting a podcast off the ground right now. I mean, and the focus is right too, right? So you're getting a podcast for the church off the ground, right? It's not a podcast that's going to become, viral or big time, right? Like if that happens, okay, so be it. But it can't be the focus of the podcast, because otherwise, you're almost guaranteed to failure. And I think that's sometimes what people are hoping to do with things like this, right? They're like, well, I'm gonna monetize it, and I'm gonna be a YouTube star, and you know, or whatever. And I could care less about that. And I think if you and the church or whoever you're doing this with has that attitude, I mean, it'll be helpful to some people, right?
Yeah.
And that's all that you're really going for. But yeah, the other way that I would encourage you to be thinking about is like, what is accomplishable where you are. So not just like, oh, the village is so awesome. Let's make plans to move to Tucson. Which, you know, whatever, if that makes sense to you, fine. But I think it's kind of unlikely. My guess is that you're pretty rooted where you are, and it's more about like, is there anything that we're doing that could translate well to where you are? Are you still exploring the Greek Orthodox Church? Are you attending?
I visited the Greek Orthodox Church one Sunday during their Divine Liturgy. I went to that.
Okay. Right.
And the pastor of the church that I went to, or the priest is what it's called in the Orthodox tradition, he's been on with Paul before, Father David Lewis.
Okay.
And he also hosts the local Dallas Jordan Peterson meetup.
Nice.
He hosts it, and a co-host of it is actually somebody who was in Paul's Sacramento Jordan Peterson meetup that moved to the Dallas area. So
nice, you got a ringer.
Yeah, so I'm not exploring Eastern Orthodoxy like in any kind of moving in that direction, trying to make that become my tradition type way. I have been attending and been involved on and off in a local church for over a decade now, and they're in the Wesleyan denomination.
Okay.
So it's not Methodist, it's not United Methodist by name or anything like that, but the name of the denomination is Wesleyan, and I think they became the denomination as they exist right now back in the early 60s. There were a couple of different denominations that came together to form this one, but they come out.
That's cool.
Tradition, yeah.
Yeah, honestly, theologically, that's probably where I am. It's just really funny. I'm probably one of the more anti-Calvinist voices in my church, and it's hilarious because we have Rod, who's like Mr. CRC, like he could be like the president of the whole denomination, and might still become the president of the denomination before too long. We'll see how things go, right? I mean, yeah. But the church is not a part of the CRC officially,
right?
So it's weird. They claim us. We're not sure how we think what exactly our stance should be to the denomination, and we're actively trying to figure that out. I mean, that process has probably derailed for a little bit now, but yeah, we're trying to figure out whether we can or should join this denomination. But yeah, it's laid bare a lot of these tricky little dead ends of theology and dogmatics and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, yeah, no, I love the village. I have mixed feelings about the CRC. They're becoming more and more positive over time. We're moving in that direction. But yeah, so you've been a part of this church for about a decade, and you're like you're in. Yeah, I mean
and for lack of a better word, I've talked about this before. You know, there's the nuns and the duns and not affiliated religiously. The duns, as I understand it, are the people who would still maybe identify as a certain type of religion. So a dun could be, you know, somebody out of a Muslim faith or somebody out of a Christian faith or some other faith, but they might say, you know, yeah, I still consider myself that thing, but I just don't go to church anymore. I don't do something like that. And so I on and off, I feel, you know, most in line with a dun, and I've called myself a failing dun because I still find myself continuing to go to church, you know. Something about this that I know is necessary for me. And
overdone?
Yes. Yes, I'm overcooked. But no, So I'm no good at being a done, because I feel like, yeah, I need to keep going. There's something in this that is good for me or good for other people, for me to be there, or some combination of the two. But I still just feel like there's something lacking, and sometimes it's probably tied into certain theological ways of seeing things, and other times it's just tied to not feeling like there's enough connection, like the kind it sounds like you're talking about, that you guys have more opportunities for conversations to open up. It just feels like the format of a standard Christian church service in the traditions that I've been in just don't really foster a lot of that. Like some of the churches that I've gone to, like they'll have like a Sunday school class before the actual worship service. And then maybe every quarter, they'll have some kind of potluck or some kind of event where there'll be the entire church has a meal after the morning service. And I know that there are different traditions who do stuff like this with more regularity. I know in the Eastern Orthodox, they have a lot of common meals together, if not after every liturgy on a Sunday. The one that I went to, they had a meal afterwards. But so I don't know. I'm not really sure exactly what I'm looking for, but I know that being able to have these kind of conversations is very refreshing and very helpful, and being able to listen to them too, not just even being involved in them. But it's one of the things that I appreciate about people sharing their conversations with Randos United is you can sit in and listen and hear some ideas that maybe people are really adept at articulating, that you have found deep down inside of you, but just have never been able to put words to or make sense of, and people are able to help you make sense of those things. And so that's one of the things that I really like about it too.
Yeah, another tie-in from Switchfoot. That's why I am a Jon Foreman fan, because he writes the songs that I wish I could write. Right? Yes. He writes the songs that if I knew how to write songs, I would write those.
Right.
Yeah. At least that's how I feel. I'm like, oh man, that guy said what anyway. I sometimes take stabs at poetry, but I've never been able to get my head around songwriting. Well, I mean, just some ideas to throw out there that I've tried from time to time, and they're not necessarily ideal, but I mean, they could develop into something that you'd find really valuable, is intentionally forming a group of people. And so it wouldn't necessarily be the whole church, but you could find a tighter group of people who you're going to go out to lunch with after service, right? Like, and that will be our routine, right? We'll go to church, and then we're going to go to brunch, lunch, whatever after the service. And the reason why we're doing that is to foster the kind of conversation that we've been talking about. I mean, like that's the point of it.
Yeah.
And I did that a lot in college because I wasn't really tied down to a particular church community. And I don't know if I did it consciously, but looking back on it, I think that's what we were up to. And it's sometimes hard to do in a church that the church as a whole, the structure of the church as a whole is not really fostering it, but it can be done. And if, for example, I had to move back home and go to the church I grew up in, which is like a 2,000 member big show production, right? Like, so you go into the show and you experience the show, and it's, it's like somewhere between like a concert and a Broadway musical. And
was it non-denominational?
Well, I mean, officially for a time it was part of the Presbyterian Church USA.
Okay.
But, I mean, that was, if you're familiar at all with Willow Creek and the kind of model that Willow Creek has put out to the world.
I went to a Willow Creek model church, down in Texas for probably about 5 years.
Okay, yeah, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. Hopefully some other people who ever listen to this know what that means, but in any case, that's kind of the way that they tried to do the church. There's a lot of good that comes out of that. I mean, you always have to consider when critiquing something, what was it before, right? Like, so
Yeah.
it may have been moving in a positive direction to go to Willow Tree compared to what it was. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. I was just dropped into it, I was like born into the pews there, right? Because my friend would always joke, we were born into the pews, he and I. Grew up in this church, and right. So I mean, and now they don't even have pews, right? It's like totally like they're like, it's like I don't even know what to say exactly. It's kind of like if you went to a conference, right? Like if you went to like a motivational speakers conference, right? Like they're chairs, right? So they're not pews, but they're like rows of chairs that are like comfy individual seats that could potentially break apart, even though they're not anyway.
Yeah, like a theater setting or a lecture hall type setting.
Right. And it's all carefully crafted. I mean, all of these choices are very conscious, like they're making anyway. So you go to this, and it's a big production, and it's all very nice and polished, and and then you and your family go to Costco after or something. I don't know, right? Like, or you go home and you watch the 49ers play on TV. That was kind of our family liturgy growing up for a lot of it, and I don't mean to bash on that. I mean, I got a lot about watching the 49ers with my dad, but if I had to go back to that church, I think I would purposefully create that kind of thing for myself and whoever I could get to join in with me, which is like, I am going to lunch here at this restaurant after church. Join me, and we're going to talk about the sermon, right? We're going to talk about, what's going on in our lives in the sermon and how they interact with, like, how does this apply to what we're thinking, or what's going on in our lives, or, what about the sermon just was off, or, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's probably the strategy I think I would use. I would much prefer it to convince my church to, serve lunch for the entire church after the service.
Right.
The logistics of that, with the way that it's currently set up, I don't know. That would be nearly impossible, because they made all these conscious choices that kind of rule it out. But ideally, that's what I would want. I would want to convince them, no, really, like, have a meal after the service. It's the way to do. It's so much better to do it that way. But yeah, that's probably what I would resort to.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's, go ahead.
Yeah, the way that that's set up in the whole Willow Creek model, with that large of a number. Yeah, I don't know how you would coordinate something like that, but yeah, I would be completely on board with it too. I don't know how we're going to do it, but let's figure it out.
Right, exactly. And there are churches that started in the same place as the church I grew up in, or where the church is now, and they consciously moved to doing a meal after the service. Like, it was there's a church nearby, it's like only a few blocks away, in fact, and they do that. But one of the reasons they did that is, like, the pastor, who was like the figurehead guy, like, abruptly left the church, right? So sometimes disaster provides this opportunity, like you were talking about with the coronavirus. Like, maybe now's the time to start a podcast, right?
Right.
Maybe something crazy happens with the church, and now's the time to roll out the meal after service. Who knows, right? I'm not wishing disaster to pull all your church, by the way. I'm just saying, like, who knows what it'll be that transforms something. Yeah. I mean, I get to have more of a voice within my really small church. One, because it's small, but two, because I've allowed myself to be called into leadership at the church, which is pretty much like Eric saying, coming over, my next door neighbor walking across the street and says, "Michael, you want to be on leadership? It would really mean a lot to me if you were." And I'd be like, "All right, Eric, I guess I'll do it." Right. It's this friendship thing, right? I mean, like, it's not because I'm the best person for the job, although I have qualities that are helpful to the church, but it's more just like Eric asked me to do it. So
Right.
yeah.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, those are some interesting ideas. I'll have to think through it some more and see what the logistics are. Like, some I have. I'm at a station in life too where certain family obligations or ability to have time with my own family just happens to intersect right with when I would have to choose between time with my family that I don't have at any other time during the week or time with my church group.
Yeah.
It kind of there's like a certain season right now where I can't really do a whole lot about it even if I wanted.
Right. Yeah, and we're all running into that here at my church as well, right? I mean, like, we used to be able to be, college students who we could drop everything, instantaneously, and we would go over to Eric's house and we would stay talking like past midnight, just, doing whatever because we were college kids, right? And there wasn't, we didn't have wives or kids or, but now we do, right? And so, my really good friend who I came, like, a big reason why I ended up in Tucson and at the Village and going to the University of Arizona and all this stuff, right? Like, I don't, it's funny, I called him the other day on my phone or texted him. I think I sent him a meme or something. It was like, he's an engineer and it was some kind of funny engineering meme. And I sent it to him and he replied back. He's like, who is this? And I realized we hadn't like used our phone to communicate with each other in so long that he didn't even have my number anymore.
Oh, wow.
And right. I still consider him a really, really good friend, but I mean, like, we don't have the kind of interaction that we used to because he's got 2 kids that are like under the age of 6. So like, that's understandably, right? That's where his focus should be. Right. So yeah, I totally understand. You've got to figure out how to spend time with your kids and create a good family life, and that's really, really valuable too. Right.
Well, speaking of that, I've got to get running.
Yes.
I'm sure you've got stuff to do too. So
I do as well. Yeah. I have a daughter that my wife and I are needing to spend time with really, really soon. So
yeah.
Yep.
I understand that.
All right. Well, this has been great. Really enjoyed it. And thanks for inviting me on. And we can maybe do it again with or without recording. And we'll definitely see each other in Discord.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know about you, but I'm okay with publishing this. So
okay. Yeah, me too.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, it was good to talk to you. It was good to meet you this way. And I'm really jealous that you guys got to have the meetup with Paul and Job and
yeah.
But I'm glad that you got to be a part of that too.
Yeah, and it was really good for Job. Really, really good for Job. So I'm really thankful that it happened the way that it did. But yeah, I hope that we can share them with the wider world.
Yeah. But selfishly, I wasn't able to come just because of various obligations. I would have come out to Arizona if I could have gotten away with it. And if I could
have
smuggled my way onto that entire road trip, I would have done it if I'd have gotten the time off. And I would have tried to persuade Jon and Paul and Job to let me tag along. So, if this trip picks up again, I would love to be able to be a part of it or to be a stop on the way. So
I think it's actually likely. I don't know when, I don't know exactly the details, but I think that it'll happen. But they may have to raffle off seats in the car because I don't think you're the only one that wants to tag along. Yeah.
And I don't mind heat, so I wouldn't care if, the hot air was blowing on me.
Oh, okay. Well, you say that now. Well, you do live in Texas, so you know what you're talking about.
Well, yeah, it's probably a little bit hotter in Arizona than it is in Texas, I would guess.
Sometimes, but this is like the mantra of Tucson, but it's a dry heat.
Right.
Right. It's a great little meme with like a skeleton, like just, and then it it says, but it's a dry heat, right?
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Michael, enjoy your time with your family. I'll do the same, and we'll try to connect up sometime again soon.
All right. Bye for now.
All right. Bye for now. Take care.